So let's continue on with a discussion of tempo in the Holst E-flat suite. The issue of tempo in the second movement is much more straightforward than it is in the first movement. One must find a sufficiently bright vivace tempo that keeps the music on its toes and is at the same time playable by the band. Ideally, I prefer a tempo that is about 152 beats per minute. This gives the music the bounce it needs while not being so fast as to lose clarity in the 16th note passages. And this tempo seems to work equally well at the Listesso tempo beginning at letter C and again at letter F. Now, while the greatest challenge of the first movement was to make subtle variations in tempo to suit the music, the challenge of movement 2 is to maintain a perfectly steady pulse from beginning to end. Difficulty occurs with the players who have long stretches of articulated eighth notes becoming fatigued and needing to breathe, and also at the seams in the music, in other words, where the orchestration changes. Those are the places where the rhythm tends to stumble. For this movement to have stability of pulse, the band must be able to play consistently stable eighth notes from the beginning of the movement to letter C, and again from measure 231 to the end of the movement. So as a rehearsal strategy, it's helpful to remove all of the melodic parts and rehearse only the motor rhythm in these sections until the pulse stabilizes. Doing so requires the players to pay attention to their role as providers of pulse. It also calls attention to where the roles change and gives the players awareness of the orchestration. Once the pulse becomes stable, reinsert the melodic material. With groups of lesser ability, this process could take several weeks before the rhythmic and melodic material fully integrates. The third movement is also straightforward with respect to tempo. One must select an appropriate tempo that works throughout the movement and maintain a steady pulse. It may be helpful to rehearse the bass line separately from letter A to measure 362 and have the players focus on the upbeat rests, perhaps even using the other players to provide sound on the upbeat rests, so that they avoid crushing the quarter notes and rushing the pulse. The pulling back of the tempo at the meno mosso at measure 436 can be fairly substantial. I prefer a steady, slower tempo be established at the meno mosso without a ritardando. The interpretation of the pio mosso at measure 443 is open to debate as to whether one should return to the tempo before the meno mosso, as if it were marked a tempo, or utilize an even faster tempo. Personally, I prefer the faster tempo to increase the excitement and anticipation of the end of the piece. One more issue that is related to time is how to move between the movements. We know that Holst indicated there should be no break between movements, but did he mean this literally? Personally, I believe there should be a very short pause between movements, about the time it takes for the resonance to clear the room and players to take a fresh breath. Anything longer gives finality to each movement, something that Holst wished to avoid. Here's one more thing. It's important to rehearse from one movement to the next so that the players become accustomed to the duration of this short pause before performing the music.